Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our Toronto Spirit Society Sunday lectures. And I'm here with you today. As you guys all know, we're working virtually for this month as we're preparing our beautiful new place, our new home that's we're going to start in May. And during this time, we're going to be having our lectures virtually. So I'm Marco Magalhães. And again, thank you all of you for joining us today. And we have a special lecture today by Tiago, who's going to be helping us and facilitating the study of today. As we usually do at Toronto Spirit Society, we're going to start our lecture today with our initial prayer. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity that we're having today of learning and growing, learning how to help each other and to work together for the good of all. Please bless our speaker, Tiago, today, and let any one of all of us so we can learn together, open our minds and our thoughts to the knowledge that's going to be delivered to us today. And may we all think about everyone that's not in here connected with us today, but might be needing help, so we can send our love, our good energy, our positive thoughts to all the people in the world that are in need at this moment. So be it. All right, everyone. So I'm having here with you now our friend Tiago. Now is going to take over and is going to help us facilitate the study. And as you all know, we're going to have a little bit of time for questions afterwards. And thank you all again, and thank you, Tiago, for doing this.
Thank you, Marco, very much. And good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone that is with us live, and good morning for everybody that may watch the lecture in the future in the internet. I am Thiago, and today we are here together to talk about something fascinating. I love the theme today, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the precursors of the Christian and Spiritist ideas. And it is fascinating because uh, even though this actually is in the Spiritist literature, sometimes we don't think about it very much. How come that the ideas, the concepts, the assumptions that today are embedded in Christianism, that are embedded in the Spiritism, came to be and were brought to us, and somehow how they were then organized, coordinated, how they became a body of knowledge that is what we know today as the Christianity and the Spiritism, right? So the first question, and I like to do that, and using a little bit of the methodology of one of those precursors, right? Because we're going to talk specifically about two figures. The first one is Socrates, and the second one is Plato. And it is also important, we're going to talk a little bit about it, why those two usually are together. We're going to understand that they are intrinsically, connected. First of all, because Plato, the philosopher, was a disciple, direct disciple of Socrates, and also because there are some similarities on the trajectory, on this trajectory of Socrates. A little bit, of course, we're not going to compare directly, but a little bit in terms of the way that Socrates' knowledge was passed to us, in the same way that the knowledge that Jesus brought to us, and the way that this message was conveyed to us, right? And Plato is here because not only he continued the work of Socrates, not only because both of them had developed ideas that are embedded in the Christianity and the Christian ideas, and also in the Spiritism, but also because Plato was responsible for bringing to light the ideas and the knowledge of Socrates. Right? So Socrates had a very interesting method, and he was known for his method of evoking knowledge and critical thinking through escalating questions. So let's think about it. So I came up with a few questions, right, for us to understand and how we are going to bring those questions to bring knowledge, the knowledge of Socrates and Plato closer to the knowledge that we have of Spiritism, and how are they connected. So let's go. The first question that I had, in fact, was how old is the Spiritism, or how old are those ideas before the Spiritism became what it is as a body of knowledge, or some of us would say uh, a doctrine, right? That's it's this body of knowledge that is scientifical, that is philosophical, and that is religious or with a moral content. So, first of all, if we think about Spiritism, many of us consider a kind of a highlight, a landmark. It is the release of the Spirit's book, right? Which was in April 1857, right? So imagine that 1857 for many of us is considered like the release of the Spirit's book was considered the beginning really of Spiritism, because the Spirit's book is the first real compilation, organization, coordination with the direct guidance of the spirits that brought this body that we call Spiritism to us. However, Allan Kardec didn't start there, right? Imagine that the Spirit's book was actually the product of a lot of inquiry, a lot of investigation, a lot of thinking, a lot of inquiring from Allan Kardec and many of his collaborators, right? He has been very active, studying the Spiritism, the Spirit's phenomena, right? Since approximately 1855, at least 2 years prior to the release of the Spirit's book. He met, in fact, a magnetizer who introduced him to a medium. And this medium was called Madame de Penmaison. And he witnessed through this encounter, in this encounter and with this magnetizer and this medium, he witnessed a spirit's communication, a communication of a spirit named Zephyr. And from that moment on, he started systematically, studying the spiritual phenomena. Right? So, more or less, let's see that it didn't start as a full body of knowledge. It started with Allan Kardec questioning, investigating, inquiring, having the critical thinking, probably doubting a lot. Is this real? This is not real. We know that in this time there were lots of encounters and meetings that were probably led by charlatans as well, that wanted to profit from the spiritual and the paranormal phenomena that started happening everywhere during this time. However, we can also think, if Allan Kardec started studying those phenomena in 1855, when did those phenomena start? Right? Well, in fact, since humans inhabit the earth, spirit phenomena occur. First of all, if we think that, number one, all of us are spirits, so spirit phenomena will happen since there are spirits inhabiting the earth. We are in evolution. We are occupying the different worlds in the universe. And also, if we remember from the Spirit's book, question 459, Allan Kardec will ask the spirits, do spirits have any influence on our thoughts and actions? And the spirits would say, their influence on you is in this regard, is greater than you suppose, for very frequently it is they who guide you, which then means that the presence, the influence of spirits and the spiritual phenomena happen more often than we would imagine. Not only that, there is a very small book that was called The Introduction to Spiritism, when Allan Kardec also would, discuss something interesting. Less evolved the spirits, more direct is their influence of the discarnate spirits on them. And actually, this is also in other spiritist literatures. Less evolved the spirits, more direct is their influence. So imagine that since the beginning of humanity, spirit phenomena are there. And probably they were here and there and scattered, understood, misunderstood, inquired, abandoned, and until, in this case, Allan Kardec brings all that knowledge together, starts compiling all that history. So that shows us that what we know as spiritism today started way before even the beginning of thinking about a body of knowledge that would coordinate and compile all those phenomena. And another question that came to me thinking about all of that, so then we would think like, how then would the spiritism, was created? Where did it start? How did it come to be? That, what were the forces and the movements that brought it all together? And one thing that is also very important for us to consider: Spiritism exists because Christianity exists, right? Therefore, thinking about the Socratic method, therefore, Christianity will exist because Jesus exists, because all the knowledge about Jesus exists, because his presence, his lessons on earth happen, and the Spiritism is the movement directed by Jesus himself and guided by the spirits elected by him to rescue the essence of his teachings and to help humanity to evolve spiritually and morally. We know, especially from two main uh, sources of knowledge of Spiritism that we have, right? The Spirit's Book and also the Gospel according to Spiritism. Many of the teachings of Jesus were distorted, were misunderstood. Jesus himself spoke in parables, through metaphors, using elements of the local culture, idioms. Therefore, it was needed a body of knowledge that would then make the teachings of Jesus understood much better to us. And Jesus himself promised the consoler, which is then the Spiritism and the spirits elected by him to bring this body of knowledge for us. Right? Also, and now we are starting to guide ourselves closer to the main theme today. Many messengers came to earth throughout history, teaching us. Teaching what? Virtues, guiding us in the direction of the good, the beautiful, the just, the correct, helping us understand the distinction between good and bad, helping us how to translate the thought of good and bad into actions that were good and bad. Many of those messengers came to earth to help to shape our evolving mentalities and our evolving thoughts to, in the future, accept the Christian ideas, to accept Jesus and his teachings, and also in the future, help us to accept and to assimilate and to understand the Spiritist ideas, the Spiritist assumptions, which only with time and with maturity we could then assimilate. Because remember, we are not talking about a body of knowledge that would be developed in a few years, right? Like a new knowledge that is developed and applied in 10 or 15 or 20 years. We are not looking at this body of knowledge for only the incarnate being, for the material being. We are looking at a body of knowledge for the spirit in evolution, the spirit that is immortal. This body of knowledge is for our spirits. We are going to take this body of knowledge with us, carry with us, that is going to help us to change, to evolve, and to grow spiritually throughout our infinite existence. Because the spirit doesn't have an end. Therefore, the way that we learn, that we grow, and that we evolve never ends either. In also in the gospel according to Spiritism, if we all remember, Allan Kardec already would say that in many points, in the gospel, in the Bible, sacred authors, in general may be unintelligible. Many seem absurd for a lack of a key to comprehend their true meaning, right? And what we understand here and what we believe and what we dedicate ourselves is to understanding and studying the key to comprehend the meaning of those teachings, the sacred teachings. And we believe that this key is to be found in the Spiritism, right? Now, let's think about these messengers and their message, right? In the Spirit's book, there are two interesting questions, and those questions are 621 and 622. 621, Allan Kardec would ask the spirits, where is God's law written? And the spirits would answer, in the conscience. If we just reflect a little bit about what we spoke in our evolving mentality, one of the aspects of our spirit is our conscience, right? Our inner being. Which conscience? The conscience that leads us to understand who we are, what we do, what we are made of, where have we been before here, what is our destination, the consequences that we feel of the actions that we take. It is in the conscience that everything is, including God's law. And Allan Kardec would continue then. Since humans carry God's law in their conscience, why does it have to be revealed to them? And the spirits would say, they have forgotten and disregarded, but God has willed for them to remember. And here is the importance of those messengers and many of those precursors, and also even the ones that continue the mission of Jesus to help us remember. Because in the question 622, Allan Kardec will continue asking, has God endowed certain individuals with the mission of revealing the divine law? Yes, certainly, the spirits will reply. In every age, in every age, it could have been centuries and centuries and centuries before Jesus. Individuals have received this mission. They are high order spirits who have incarnated with the purpose of enabling humankind to progress. And I think here that phrase will give then the scope of the importance and the level of evolution of the spirits that we're going to talk about. High order spirits who have incarnated with the purpose of enabling humankind to progress. Now we can reflect why Allan Kardec would then pick those two spirits and include their teachings as so important in the introduction of the gospel according to Spiritism. If not for them being high order spirits who had the mission to help us to progress, enable us to progress. So that is a very important reason why, with the sanction of the spirits, that Allan Kardec brings a summary of the teachings of Socrates and Plato to us. Because not only they were sent by Jesus himself to help humanity to progress, but also to plant the seeds of many of the ideas that today are embedded in the Spiritist ideas, embedded in the Spiritism body of knowledge that we use, that we strive to follow, and that is helping us to progress. That is the reason why they are here with us. And Allan Kardec would call them, in fact, right, the precursors of the Christian idea and Spiritism in the introduction of the Gospel according to Spiritism. So let's get to know a little bit about them, right? Shall we understand a little bit who they were here with us, and then we're going to move towards understanding their contributions to us related with Spiritism. But let's see what the world knows about them, right? First of all, let's think about about Socrates, sorry. So Socrates lived between the years 470 and 399 before Christ. We're talking about he was born almost 500 years before Christ. Then Plato lived between the years 449 until between 348 347 BC, according to certain different literatures. There is some speculation when he discarnated, but let's think that they lived between 500 and 350 years before Jesus, right? Imagine that they lived not only before Jesus, but also before Moses. So Socrates and Plato precede not only Jesus, but even Moses. Both lived in Athens, in Greece. And the interesting thing about Socrates and why, Plato is also so important to understand Socrates is just like Jesus, Socrates left nothing written. All his teachings were orally transmitted. His disciples were the ones who wrote a lot of the lectures that Socrates gave, a lot of the talks that he gave in public, and described a lot of the interactions and the stories, including Socrates' trial at the event of his discarnation, right? And we're gonna mention a little bit of the reasons why he was condemned to death. They were both what? What was their task and their duty in life? They were philosophers. That's what they were, right? So let's remember, Allan Kardec, in the introduction of the Gospel according to Spiritism, says that many of the Christian ideas were scattered through the centuries before Jesus' arrival. Huh? God then sent Jesus to summarize, coordinate, complete those scattered elements that he had the mission to do for us, transform into a body of knowledge that is the Christian idea. You know? And Allan Kardec would say that Socrates and Plato, through their philosophical ideas, were the main precursors of the Christian idea that was then, taken and used by Jesus to coordinate and to complete this body of knowledge. And he used those seeds that were planted by Socrates and Plato to propagate then the laws of love, the doctrine of love, right, that we have to us. There are many contributions, right, from Socrates and from Plato. If we think about, some of the contributions, right, that Socrates had for us, it is the way of thinking. He was instrumental to shape the way that our Western societies think. And he developed something fundamental called the Socratic method, which is a way of escalating, questioning, and inquiring that would then encourage critical thinking, questioning assumptions, right? It is a method of refining ideas. It is a method of shaping and sharpening our way of thinking, our way of think about the world, about each other, right? Socrates considered that it was his religious duty to call his fellow citizens to the examined life, to examine life by engaging their fellows, his fellows, in philosophical conversations. How incredible this is! He defined that as his religious duty in life to help his fellow citizens to think, to engage in philosophical conversations, because for them, the philosophy was then the way of life to make meaning of life. Philosophy would be not only what we call today a discipline in school, but it was a way of living, a way of being in the world that they considered that was the only way that life will have meaning. So imagine how important this is that we don't realize, but Socrates' methodology and his way of thinking and his conversations with people in Athens in his time influenced the way that we relate with each other today. Through Socrates, though Socrates, he professed, it was very interesting. Socrates, he said that he was ignorant about everything. And he would actually be very critical of anybody that would say that they were masters or experts in anything. And his Socratic method was in many ways used to question and to break down the assumptions of certain people that were calling themselves experts on things. And many times, engaging in those conversations, he would then come to that conclusion that most of us are, in fact, ignorant, especially those who consider themselves experts on something. And that's why he would always say, I am ignorant. I don't know absolutely anything. Especially, he said, especially about ethical things, subjects that he investigated, like the nature of things, the nature of what is good and what is bad in life. And he came, and he had a few of those assumptions, like human wisdom begins when we recognize our own ignorance. And that is valid still today, right? We know that science today, we know that developing knowledge, we know that the impulse that we have to know things only exists because we admit to ourselves that we don't know. What is the name that we call this today? In Spiritism, we talk a lot about it. It is called humbleness. It is called humility. It is admitting our simplicity towards life, our humbleness towards the greatness of the universe. That we are humble to understand that we're not better than anybody else. That we are here helping each other. This thought exists in us, in our collective thinking, because of those assumptions that were developed by Socrates. Another one is a life that is not examined, it is not worth living. Right? That's what many of us would say, that sometimes some people just cruise through life without taking anything from it. It is only when we make that effort to examine the life, its meaning, the reasons why we go through things. Spiritism encourages us to do that all the time. What is the meaning of our life? Why do some of us suffer? Why do some of us not? Why the differences that exist, among people, societies, what is the meaning of what happens? That's how we start understanding everything. And also, he would say, and that here is very important, ethical virtue is the only thing that matters. And when we think about ethics, we would also understand that Socrates is considered the father of ethics and moral. And here we have something incredibly powerful and connecting us with Spiritism, right? We incessantly talk about ethics and moral. The ethics is the knowledge of the distinction of good and bad. And for Spiritism, we go many levels above as well, using that escalating knowledge to say the ethics is the distinction then of God's laws to what is not God's laws, right? And what is moral? Moral is the attitude, right? That is founded on this ethics, right? Moral is the operationalization of ethics, is the action. Is our action good? Is our action bad? Is our action, bringing goodness, bringing comfort, consolation, knowledge, enlightenment, insight, right? Joy, or our actions are causing pain, confusion, suffering, deceit to ourselves and to others. This then comes fundamentally as a foundation of our way of thinking from the teachings of Socrates. Right? And finally, Socrates would say something interesting. A good person cannot never be harmed, because whatever misfortune they may suffer, the virtue will remain intact. How powerful and beautiful this is, right? Because again, we may go through a lot of trials, tribulations, and suffering, but the virtues that we develop, and the virtues are what in Spiritism? The qualities of our spirits, right? The humbleness, the simplicity, the forgiveness, the respect, right? The knowledge that we acquire that is for the greater good and the common good. These will remain intact. And that's what is right there in the third part of the Spirit's book, when we talk about the law of freedom, when the spirits teach us that the freedom that we have is the freedom of thought, and that is related with the virtue. The freedom of thought means that whatever is within us that we develop, the virtues that we acquire, nobody will take away. It is with us in our spirit for eternity. Now, quickly, let's go a little bit to Plato, right? Plato is incredibly important. Number one, he was the one that documented the life and the works of and the teachings of Socrates. For that, he's already very important for all of us because the readings about Socrates come from the writings of Plato. Also, he founded the academy in Athens, in Greece. The academy in Athens is considered the first Western university. So, folks, let's think about knowledge. What he started, what is considered the first Western world university. Therefore, he is responsible to develop this uh, specific institution that today all over the world exists to compile, to organize, to archive, to evolve, and to transmit this knowledge that is so important for our humanity. Not only that, there is another very important work of Plato that also is very important for us: love. Plato had a very interesting view of love, and especially when he studied and he discussed a lot about what is called eros. Right? Eros is considered for many the physical expression of love, even like the physical, material, the carnal expression of love, which is considered an inferior type of love for many. However, Plato would then discuss that eros, more than a physical expression of the desire, it is actually the moving force towards knowledge and beauty. Eros is considered by Plato a divine force and a necessary component of human flourishing. Eros, for Plato, is the desire for wholeness and for completion. Now, there are two main things here that we need to consider. Thinking about that importance for the knowledge that we have today in life, who used a lot of that was the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, because he would study a lot human sexuality, which is then eros. And he would say that human sexuality, it is an evolving force, and one of the tasks that we have in our life, it is to shape and to refine that sexual energy from purely the carnal, purely the material desire, to then knowledge, to how the sciences are developed, to how our energy goes through know and build and construct things. And we know as well that in Spiritism, that's exactly what we talk about. That is a very important um, video, right? Which is one of the interviews that Francisco Cândido Xavier, the Brazilian medium, on the TV, and this program was called Pinga Fogo, and he's asked about the sexuality. And then he also said something beautiful. If so many of the human qualities are supposed to be divine, why is sex and sexuality relegated to obscurantism? Right? And Freud did that. He brought that idea that human sexuality is actually a force to be harnessed and that can be transformed from the material to the sublime. We talk about that in Spiritism constantly, that humans need to educate their inferior material and animal passions, eros, the material desire, the desire that comes from the physicality. We have the task to educate that force, that is that sexual force. Sexuality is the way that life is created. Humans incarnate, and many other species, we incarnate through the, the materializing of what sex and sexuality bring together in terms of bringing the bodies, the forming the bodies, and helping it is the vehicle of bringing spirits to incarnation, which is a gift of God for all of us. So, how important this is. And we are not even directly talking about what Allan Kardec listed, sorry, as contributions of the doctrines of Socrates and Plato that are directly related to Spiritism, but it is only necessary for us to go to their body of knowledge, to Socrates and to Plato, to understand that what they developed, what they thought about, what they brought to us is used, and it is very important for us today in our lives, right? So if we go, then you may ask me, Tiago, beautiful what you're saying, but what does it have to do with Spiritism, right? Okay, let's go there. So Allan Kardec will then, of course, in the introduction of the Gospel according to Spiritism, summarize the doctrine of Socrates and Plato in relation to the importance, right, that Spiritism has for us. So let's just go, uh, look at those specific contributions that they have for Spiritism. And there, and I'm looking up a little bit because I have another screen, okay, folks? So I'm looking at you, and I'm also looking at another screen that I have the material here with me. First aspect of their doctrine: human being is an incarnate soul. Look at that. Now, before the incarnation, it existed in union with the primordial types, the ideas of the truth, the good, and the beautiful. Upon incarnating, it separates from them, and remembering its past, it is tormented to various degrees by the desire to return to it. Look how powerful this is, right? And Allan Kardec would say that one could not more clearly enunciate the distinction and independence between the intelligent principle and the material principle. And here he talks about that also the degrees of existence, right? The planes of existence, incarnate and discarnate. As, right, an intelligent principle, it is connected. It's primordial types that they talk about. The ideas of truth, good, and beauty. That is the intelligent principle, right? And then when we are connected with the material principle, we forget it, but then our intuition leads us to want to evolve, to return to that. It is our impulse, our instinct to return to the source of the intelligent principle. Who created the intelligent principle? What created the intelligent principle? God. It is the desire of the unity with God, right? Another aspect, right? The soul wanders, becomes confused when he uses the body in order to consider any object. How powerful this is, right? It feels giddy, as if you are intoxicated, because it is connected to things that are by their very nature subject to change. So see about taking in consideration and putting in perspective the material things, the things that perish, the things that change, right? In contrast with the ethical things that Socrates talks about, or the virtues, right? On one hand, wherever he contemplates his own essence, the individual turns towards which is pure, eternal, and immortal. And being of the same nature, it remains connected there for as long as possible. Look at this, how beautiful it is. How can we today in Spiritism, we constantly are also teaching about it, how we can remain connected with what Socrates, what is pure, what is good, and what is immortal. It is through prayer, through that inner conversation that we have with the spiritual world. When we connect ourselves with our essence that is spiritual, right? See the intrinsic connection that those teachings have with what we teach in Spiritism, right? We learn in Spiritism. While we have our body, and as long as our soul is immersed in its corruption that we call the body, the corruption of the body, it will never possess the object of our desires. And what is Socrates saying that is the object of our desires? The truth. Socrates says the object of the soul's, the spirit's desire is the truth. And here, more than ever, it really, brings us to who is the truth and the light, right? The way, the truth, and the light. It is Jesus, right? Who is the most perfect type of morality, of ethics, of connection with what is good, what is pure, what is immortal, right? I am the way, the truth, and the light, Jesus said. And the object of our desire is the truth. That's what Socrates would say. Sounds like a coincidence, folks. I don't think it is a coincidence, right? And he will continue talking a lot about the nature of the soul and the nature of the material life, which he calls the corruption, which he calls the corrupt, right? The principles of incarnation that he talks about, right? Including, look at this, after our death, the daemon, the daimon that he would call, which actually it is the original name for the spirit. So the daimon is actually the spirit, the intelligence, right? After our death, the spirit or the daimon who had been assigned to us during life leads us to a place where all those may be taken to Hades, which is the the world of the dead, right? With the spiritual world, where the spirits are gathered in order to be judged after having remained in Hades for the time required. Souls are reconducted to this life for numerous and long periods. It is known as well, folks, that Socrates had his daimon. He actually was a medium. He received communications and he communicated and he received instructions from his daimon, that is called, from his protector spirit, from his spirit guide, to guide him through a lot of what he did. He was divinely inspired to do what he did. And he's talking about being guided by our protector spirits, even through, the erraticity or the period where we are discarnated, to analyze the spirit. We don't talk about judgment in terms of punishment, but about recognizing our actions, right? What was good and what was bad, what was unethical, what was unethical, what was moral, or morally, uh, um, distinct and what was not. And then we return for numerous and long periods, to do what? To evolve, to grow, right? To perfect ourselves, to acquire more virtues, right? And Uh, Allan Kardec would also say that both Christianity and Spiritism teach, the same thing, that is the constant preoccupation of philosophers, as understood by Socrates and Plato, the ones who want, to acquire the virtues, is to take greater care of the soul and less care of this life, which is only an instant from the perspective of eternity. If the soul is immortal, would it not be wise to live with a view to eternity? Look at that, folks. How powerful and how beautiful this is, right? Of course, that we're not going to, point by point. We have at least, 21 topics that Allan Kardec discusses during this time. But we can summarize in a few ways. There are a few points that we can kind of somehow bring it all together, right? Socrates would say, all men from childhood do more harm than good. But remember, we are talking about the immortal spirits. God created us simple and ignorant. Our harms that we do are a result of our simplicity and our ignorance and imperfection. So here we have the creation of us spirits, simple and ignorant, moving towards perfecting ourselves through the moral transformation, through acquiring the virtues. Second, take the greatest care of your soul in relation to eternity and not so much to this life, which is just an instant. How beautiful this is, right? Third, if the soul is immortal, it must return after this life to an equally invisible and immaterial world. Here is the seeds planted about not only the immortality of the soul, but also about the multiple reincarnations, right? More, if the death were the total dissolution of man, it would be a greater advantage for bad men, he would say. Men, he says, let's think about humans, okay, folks? If death were the total dissolution of humans, it would be a greater advantage for the bad humans, who after death would be free from their bodies, their souls, and their vices at the same time. But we know very well that that is not what happens, because when we return the spiritual world, we will return with the consequences of our deeds and also with the virtues and the vices that we acquire. There is a natural disposition in each one of us to be much less aware of our own defects than of defects of others. And this is so, so important. Don't we remember one of the teachings of Jesus? Instead of looking at the speck on your neighbor's eyes, look at the log in your own eyes. And here is Socrates saying there is a natural disposition in each one of us to be much less aware of our own defects than the defects of others. It is about what, folks? It is about judgment. And in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus already said, judge not, right? The lesson is to judge ourselves, or as Socrates himself would say, know thyself, and you will know the universe of God, because he was inspired by the oracle of Delphi. Know thyself, and you will know the universe of God. Through self knowledge, you will find the moral defects that we have, and we can transform them into moral qualities, or how we call virtues. Virtue, the next one, virtue cannot be taught. It comes as a gift from God to those who possess it. That's very interesting, that. In other words, let's translate that. No one can be taught to have moral qualities. We need to acquire them through successive reincarnations and experiences and practicing those qualities. No one can teach us in the same sense that you can bring the horse to the water, but the horse needs to be the one drinking it. That's what it is. We can bring knowledge to people, but we as people are the ones that need to put in practice. And it is important to distinguish the pure soul, truly immaterial, which feeds like God on knowledge and thought, from the soul that is more or less tainted by material impurities, which is us. And here Socrates is talking about the progression of the spirits, right? That was given by us already, right? And finally, if doctors, and that is a very interesting one, if doctors fail to treat most illnesses, is because they treat the body without the soul. And because if it is not always in good condition, it is impossible for for the part to be well. And here we talk about what we are unveiling very slowly, which is that connection, right, between the spiritual and the material sciences, the spiritual and material knowledge, understanding that the spiritual influences in our life are such that even the science that we have today, including illnesses and sickness and many conditions that we have that we even don't find the causes, is because the cause is in our spirits. Like many of them are causes because of our past experiences, and we bring the consequence of those experiences, right? In other words, the illness originates in the psyche, right? In the soul. Usually what? Pride, vanity, laziness, cruelty, among other vices, right? They are the vices of the spirit. They generate illnesses in the perispirit and in consequence in the physical body, right? Here we have, folks, a little bit of who, right, those spirits are for us, right? In the words of the Spirit Emmanuel in the book, In the Way to the Light, he would say that Socrates was accused of corrupting the young Athenians, filling their hearts with their poison of freedom. Imprisoned and humiliated, his benevolent spirit did not cower before the harsh trials that filled his chalice of bitterness. Aware of his mission, he refused to escape from his cell when his doors were secretly left open by the kindness of some judges. Emissaries from the invisible realm surrounded his magnanimous and enlightened soul during the bitterest time of his ordeal. And when his wife approached the prison bars to tell him about the nefarious sentence to death by hemlock, he clamored at the peak of her anguish and despair. Socrates, Socrates, the judges have sentenced you to death. So what? Replied the philosopher resignedly. They too have been sentenced by nature, but the sentence is unjust. Right? Socrates and Plato are among the main precursors of the Christian idea and of Spiritism. And for sure, they are emissaries of God, sent by Jesus to help to shape our mentalities, to help to enlighten our souls, to teach us about what is good, what is pure, and what is immortal, about teaching us about the one and only God. And those teachings remain with us, compiled, organized, completed, brought to us by Jesus in his doctrine and his teachings to us, and renewed in essence by the Spiritism that for sure continues having the contributions of Socrates and Plato and many other emissaries of God, inspiring us in our lives to be better, to grow, to be more ethical, to be more moral, and to acquire and practice more of the virtues. All right, folks. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is the lecture that we have for today. And before our before our um, oh, look at that, so many messages here. Before um, our final prayer, I'm gonna take a quick look here in the comments today, right? And you guys can write again if you want. So here we have Nadia, good morning. Leonardo, good morning. um, Janette, good morning. Joyce, Marilia. Um, we have here a comment from Leonardo. In Plato's Apology of Socrates, Socrates claimed to have a daimon, right? A divine something that frequently warned him in the form of a voice against mistakes, but never told him what to do. There you go. So that is you're absolutely right, right, Leonardo. He then is, it is the description of our protector spirits, our guides, that would somehow warn us and inspire us, but because of our free will, right, they will not tell us what to do. Very good. Sebastian, good morning. Um, and Nadia, again, amazing presentation. Thank you so much. Many points to think about. The one sticking with me is focusing on our soul as we are immortal. Thank you. That's exactly it. And remember, it is being in the world, but not being of the world, as we would say. It is being in the world. Consider that life is essential for us. This is the stage where we practice our virtues and that we change from vices to virtues. But at the end of the day, it is always with the consideration that we are living to the future, and the future is spiritual, and the future is immortal. And know ourselves is not easy, even when we want to learn, is a daily exercise. Absolutely. In the Spirit's book, we actually believe that is Socrates really that says like that would then inspire that recommendation that was given by Saint Augustine. Do a daily exercise, right? At the end of the day, think about what you did. Was it good? Was it bad? How I contributed to life? How I contributed to myself? How I contributed to others? It's a kind of a check-in that we can have at the end of the day, for instance, that helps us a lot. It's a daily exercise, can be simple, 5 minutes a day, but then we can do that exercise of looking inwards and to understand the meaning of our actions, right? Leonardo here again. Tiago, do you believe that in the time of Socrates, the way humans understood gods is the same society sees today? Well, let's think about that, Leonardo. It's a very good question. And remember, we are all evolving, right? So imagine that if many of the spirits that inhabited Earth back in that time, and we're talking about 2,500 years ago, if they evolved, if we evolved, and if we were there and we are here today, there is a good chance that we think differently. In fact, Socrates Socrates had the belief of one and only God. Many would say that Socrates was a pagan. Socrates was not a pagan because pagan would then believe in different gods. But at the end of the day, what happens is we still have religions and faiths and societies that believe in multiple gods, right? And they are in their own state of evolution, and it is important for them, and there is a reason for them to have that belief. Many of them carry that belief from centuries ago. Many of them carry tradition. Many of them may be changing their minds. We, as spiritists, consider there is only one God that is named differently across different religions and across time, but there is a distinction, right, between the multiplicity of gods and many of them with human characteristics. If we look back in the Olympus, if we look back in other religions, many of them have human characteristics because they are still uh, anthropomorphic gods, which means gods that have human characteristics. And this means that we are still bringing that idea of God to the material life instead of making that exercise to transcend, to try to grasp the essence of what God is, not who, but what God is. That is all spirit, all immaterial, right? All good, that is eternal. But many of the gods, especially back then, and still for certain religions today, they are considered what? Uh, Somehow having characteristics of humans. They are not totally, transcended. That's why, right? But again, great questions, great points, great reflections, and I hope that today was meaningful for everybody. Let's then end today with our final prayer, right? So let's thank, first of all, God, who is our Father, our Mother, our creator of all of us, of all this beautiful universe, creator of all that is pure, all that is good, all that is immortal. Thank you for creating all of us and placing your laws in our conscience so we can practice those virtues and make grow those laws within us to come closer to you, Father. We like to thank Jesus, who is our master, our most perfect type, our guide of morality. Thank you for your teachings. Thank you for your lessons, for your examples, for your love and devotion and protection. Thank you for placing us in this earth that is so important for us that we call home. So then we can evolve, we can learn, and we can love, and we can practice the love with each other. Thank you for the protection, the inspirations of our protector spirits, our mentors, and our guides. And also thank you for all the messengers of God, for all his emissaries that came in all times in humanity to teach us the virtues, to help us to change our ways, to be better, to think better, to feel better, and to remind us of our immortal spiritual nature. And we ask God, protect, inspire, and shed over us all your love, all your protection, and protect our homes, and protect our lives, our families, and especially the places in this world that need you the most. And may we go forward in this next week with lots of love and with lots of blessings. Thank you, and so be it. All right, folks. Thank you. Thank you, Nadia, Leonardo. Thank you, Joyce, very much. I wish you all have a great Sunday. It's beautiful outside. If anybody wants to take advantage of the vitamin D outside, please do that. I will probably do that. Thank you so much. That is a lot to reflect, really. And I wish you many blessings and all the best. Bye bye, everybody.